In this video, we're going to look at the contrast to master morality as Nietzsche is framing this issue, slave morality, which is a very charged term, which is kind of the way Nietzsche is, right? As you saw from the reading, he's very polemical and writes to be really emotionally provocative, and so this term certainly is. So remember that on his view, master morality, that's the moral system that can make that following makes one's life the most worth living. So slave morality is the opposite of master morality. So how does it work? Well, it's sort of what we find in conventional morality and then also in moral theory like Kantianism and utilitarianism. So it's impartial, right? Each being is of equal value. There are different explanations for that. Is morally equal. So right there, on the Kantian view, a bunch of us are morally equal because we have humanity. We're rational and autonomous. On the utilitarian view, many of us have moral standing because we're sentient, right? And that means that our happiness and suffering gets added into the total happiness and suffering in determining what is the best outcome. And not only are we all morally equal, but we're in fact of positive value, and so we're deserving of aid. Others should look out for us and be both altruistic and respect us. So there are a bunch of virtues that typically go with these views, ways that it's good to be. So sympathy is a virtue, having a kind helping hand, the warm heart that cares for others, being patient, being diligent, being humble, being friendly. These are all, on Nietzsche's views, virtues that are targeted at decreasing suffering. So they're ways of being in the world that avoid causing suffering, and that when they encounter suffering, help to alleviate it. But note that they're not, as Nietzsche is thinking of them, they're not these sort of creative, and yeah, they're not creative virtues. So for Nietzsche, utilitarianism and Kantianism are the prime examples of slave moralities. They're different, right? So they may say, okay, well, they have different things to say about what we should do, for example, in the trolley problem or O'Malley's cases, but there are similarities. They're impartial, they're other-oriented, and they focus on kindness and respect. So, and then also we talked about the social contract earlier. That's something you might do that would be of appeal even to an egoist. But note that even there, you're entering into the social contract because you're seeing yourself as weak and vulnerable, not as strong and powerful. So slave morality, it's who would go for slave morality? The people who would enter into the social contract, the people who are abused or oppressed or suffering or just vulnerable. And for those people, these qualities are the most useful for them, or the most useful not only for them to have, but for others to have, and they're the best way of dealing with the burden of a difficult and challenging existence. And they are, on Nietzsche's view, a pessimistic view, because what is being sort of focused on by these views is, okay, how do we avoid creating suffering? How do we alleviate suffering? How do we help other people in need? And there's not, again, this focus on, well, how do we actually live like a really good life? For example, an exciting life. And on these views, it's natural to be skeptical of sort of people who, of the nobility when Nietzsche's writing, so the dukes and counts and kings and queens, and more broadly of the powerful people, because what did powerful people do? Well, on this view, they're the oppressors, and so the slave morality is the morality of the people who are oppressed, and so they're skeptical of the nobility, who on Nietzsche's view may be doing some valuable things even though they're oppressive. And so the attitude of the person who is, again, as Nietzsche's characterizing it, who advocates slave morality, is the one important thing to do is to punish the evil people. And who are they? The powerful people. And so in particular, we're going to punish the powerful people. And so that means that not only are, as a slave morality, as someone who lives slave morality, are you taking on these virtues yourself, but you're imposing the values of slave morality on others. So, and this is in contrast with the way that if you're following master morality, then you're concerned with how you behave, and you might have sort of rivals and friends and so on, but you're not necessarily trying to tell other people how they ought to believe. Whereas if you're following slave morality, then you think, no, it's not just that I act this way, it's that everybody should act in this way. And that's certainly something that is an element of the utilitarian and Kantian views, right? Not only are all people of value, but according to these theories, but the theories also say here's how each person should act. So Nietzsche's example, he's interested in thinking about morality as it relates to what it's like to follow the morality. What is your life like if you do? So his example at the end of our reading is of a stupid man. He says it's the good man, and this is the person who's good in accordance with slave morality, must in any case be the safe man. He is good-natured, easily deceived, perhaps a little stupid. Bonhomme, which is a French word for just a sort of a gentleman, a good man, but just like a pleasant person. And Nietzsche says everywhere that slave morality gains the ascendancy is in control. Language shows a tendency to approximate the significations of the words good and stupid. So what he's saying there is when people are following slave morality, then the words that they apply the word good to are also things that are stupid and vice versa. So is he a fan of slave morality? I think it's pretty clear that he's not. Following slave morality, in his view, especially for some people, as we'll see, it might be the best way to go, but especially when it's not necessary. On Nietzsche's view, it is not life-enhancing. Why? Well, because you're not treating yourself as a superior source of value or trying to express that value. You're focused on assisting others and showing respect for their autonomy. And so it's this other-oriented approach that is concerned with your impacts on others and making sure that they're of the right kind for those others. Now, one might wonder, is Nietzsche right that the stupid man is a central example of slave morality? Maybe someone following what they wouldn't necessarily call slave morality is actually living a life worth living. And I think we can actually think of examples like this. I'm not going to give any here because I'd like you to spend a little bit of time as part of your homework assignment for this module to think about, what would be an example of someone following what Nietzsche would call slave morality that would actually be an example of, no, that is a life worth living. And this person probably would not call what they're doing slave morality, right? That's Nietzsche's term, not the term that the person would apply to their own moral system. This term slave morality is a pejorative term. But to summarize sort of what we've seen about Nietzsche's views about slave and master morality is going to be best for those who can successfully follow it, whereas slave morality is going to be best for those who need it. There might be a situation where you don't have a lot of power, where there is a lot of threat, and in that case it would be valuable for you to follow slave morality basically because you can get into the social contract. But if you want to follow master morality. Why? Well, because it would lead you to a better life. Why? Well, because its harsh constraints are going to allow you to produce these great life-enhancing achievements that are expressions of your innate value. That's why. And that, sure, Nietzsche thinks sounds good. That's what we really want. That's what's best, if we can get it. And he thinks that slave morality is hypocritical in its opposition to master morality. Why? Well, because if you're following slave morality, it's because that's what is in fact most life-enhancing for you, at least if you... that's the good reason to follow slave morality. But if you're following it because it's life-enhancing for you and someone else is following master morality because it's life-enhancing for them, then you shouldn't be telling that other person how to live. Okay, so we've sort of sketched out Nietzsche's arguments about master morality and slave morality. I've spent a little bit more time just explaining what they are. So in the next module, we're going to start to, or not the next module, the next video, going to start to get into his actual argument for saying, yeah, master morality is the way you should go, because so far it's all just been sort of assertion and not argument. So we'll start to get into some argument.